Hey there guys, welcome back to another one of my whiteboard videos, and I'm excited to be doing this one for you because this is a topic I've been meaning to do a whiteboard video on for a while now, and that is the secret space program. Now this is one of the most fascinating subjects. I mean, you just hear the words secret space and program together and your imagination can run wild, but it's also one of the most important because, and you'll see why, how much money and what kind of technologies are locked away in these projects. And it's also, I find, to be one of the most unknown subjects that there is out there. And a lot of dots within this subject are crucial to know in trying to formulate your reality and understand why the world is the way it is. So I'm going to make this as succinct as I can for you guys and also as credible. Because a lot of people always ask, you know, when it comes to the secret space program topic or even extraterrestrials, they're like, evidence, right? Evidence, evidence, evidence. Where is it? Well, it's out there. There's a lot of it. You know, there's plenty of books and articles and interviews and everything. So, of course, you're watching my video here. And as I always do, I'll be linking plenty of good resources in the description below this video. Resources that have helped me and that I think will help you in your continuing education of this topic. And one of those resources that I find extremely credible and extremely amazing is the testimony of the late William Tompkins. If you don't know who William Tompkins is, he is a whistleblower. I'm calling him a whistleblower even though he didn't like to be called that, but we're going to call him, for sake of the argument, a whistleblower who actually worked in a secret think tank for Douglas Aircraft Company in the 1950s, literally designing spacecraft for the United States Navy. And before that, he worked in naval intelligence during World War II, literally debriefing Navy spies that were embedded in Germany's secret space programs that they had during World War II. And we'll talk a little bit more about Germany's involvement in all of this, but William Tompkins' testimony is just mind-blowing and it's fascinating. So I suggest you go check it out, and if you would like me to tell you about it, I'll be doing a webinar later this month devoted to him. So I'll be doing a presentation on Tompkins' story and how he is literally almost a beginning pillar in secret space programs. And I was lucky enough to be able to sit down with him and conduct the very last interview that he ever did before he passed synchronistically on the day of the eclipse last in August. But we'll also be releasing that interview at that webinar. So if you would like a lot deeper of a discussion on this topic, go check that webinar out. But anyway, as for now, let's get into all of this. So I'm going to go through 3 topics, and then as you can see in red here, I have a few bullet points in each of these topics. We're going to discuss how the technology was obtained by the military-industrial complex, if you will, of this planet to make different secret space programs. And also, side note here, it's not just secret space programs, but it's also what's underground. There's a lot of deep underground military bases, or DUMBs, that are involved in all of these secret black projects as well. But anyway, we'll talk about how they got the technology. We'll talk about how these factions got the money to build out these programs, both underground and above our heads. And then also we'll talk about how it's all been kept secret. And this might be one of the most important things to talk about, because when talking about the secret space program, it's difficult for people to comprehend how projects this vast in scope are kept secret. So we'll talk about how they are. Connect some dots for you. But first, before we get at all this, I just want to go over, if you've never heard about the secret space program, or the SSP as we'll call it to save time and oxygen, what is the SSP? It's basically ultra secret projects owned by, call them the deep state, the military industrial complex, you know, the New World Order, if you will, whatever you want to call them. Ultra secret projects owned by the deep state with very advanced science and technology. And not just advanced, but It's science and technology that's almost completely opposite as to whatever we're told, whatever we're brainwashed with by our mainstream media and science and educational institutions. So keep that in mind. It's not just advanced, it's like ass backwards. So ultra secret projects owned by the deep state with advanced science and technology kept outside public and government knowledge. So not only public knowledge, granted, oh, if it's, how is it secret anymore? If you're talking about it, it's not so secret now, ha ha ha, that joke's out of the way. So it's not only kept outside public knowledge, but government knowledge as well. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about why and the secrecy and the compartmentalization of it all. But by government knowledge, basically it's kept outside Congress's consciousness. A lot of them are unaware of it. It's even kept outside a lot of presidents' knowledge as well. So, I mean, these programs are ultra secret, right? And there's been a lot of people silenced over them as well. Again, we'll discuss that. But anyway, getting into now the information regarding it all. So first let's discuss how they actually got the science and technology to create their super secret spaceships with. And first let's discuss Germany. So this is going to be a little bit of history. Of course, there's tons of history we have to unlearn and then relearn, and at least in terms of the modern secret space program, the secret space programs over the last 100 years, they originate pretty much in Germany. So in the early 1900s, in the 20s and 30s and up until World War II, Germany was much more invested in what's called qualitative superiority over quantitative superiority. And qualitative superiority means basically advanced technology. And quantitative superiority means quantity, boots on the ground. So the Axis powers, meaning Germany, they thought they could win the war with advanced technology. The Allied powers, they wanted boots on the ground. America, they kept making tanks, kept making bombs. They thought they could win the war with that. So because Germany was much more interested in the qualitative aspect of power building, they were very interested in occult knowledge. In occult, in this instance, just meaning hidden, or esoteric, if you will, but basically hidden knowledge that most people in the public would find crazy. Things like Atlantis, things like, you know, ancient civilizations and the technologies they had. Well, in German secret societies and, you know, at the top levels in the elite of Germany, they took that extremely seriously. So they actually sent expeditions around the world to obtain that knowledge. They went, for instance, to Tibet to find ancient scrolls and texts and scriptures and bring that back to Germany and decode that. And, you know, I kind of dropped a couple seeds and hints there when I said modern secret space program. If you actually go read the Vedic scriptures from India, there is reference to ancient flying ships that they had called Vimanas. You see? So Germany knew that, and that's who, you know, they took it very seriously, and that's why they went to find it. So that's one way that they were able to obtain some of this knowledge. Another way was a woman named Maria Orsich. So Maria Orsich actually channeled information from extraterrestrial entities, and this information was on how to build a spaceship. Now, of course, Maria Orsich, when she channeled this, she was doing it for peaceful means. So the Germans said, oh yeah, we'll work with you for peaceful means. This is just going to be for travel. But the Nazis and SS and various secret societies in Germany, they, of course, subverted that and then weaponized a lot of that technology. But anyway, Maria Orsich channeled this, and she channeled it for a secret society in Germany called the Vril Society. So Maria Orsich channeled for the Vril Society, and then another way that Germany was able to obtain the science was through a technology exchange, and that technology exchange occurred with very negative extraterrestrials, namely the reptilian species. So because the reptilians, being so negative and conquest-oriented, they aligned very well with German secret society and Nazi ideals, where they also wanted to conquer. So because of them being so similar, they made a pact where the reptilians would basically hand down some saucer craft and some technology to the Germans if the Germans would conquer the world, and of course give them some humans and other stuff for the galactic slave trade in the process. But anyway, we won't get into that dark stuff. So those three ways, namely, were the main ways that Germany was able to obtain this technology. And of course, I mentioned earlier the qualitative and quantitative aspect of it. So during World War II, the Germans weren't able to weaponize this technology enough in Europe to beat back the Americans. At least at first, the Allied powers with more boots on the ground and more tanks were able to beat Germany out of Europe, but Germany then took their technology down to Antarctica. So in their research of the occult knowledge, they found out about the history of Antarctica and how Antarctica actually has a lot of ancient civilization and stuff buried under the ice there, and giant caverns under the ice where they could take a lot of their technology too, right? So Germany, because they were getting beat back in Europe, in the late 30s and early 40s began taking a bunch of their stuff down to Antarctica. And then you can research into, for instance, Operation High Jump, where the Americans figured out that the Germans took their stuff down to Antarctica through the spies that I mentioned earlier that the Americans had in Germany. And then the Americans sent an expedition led by Admiral Richard Byrd called Operation High Jump to Antarctica. Admiral Byrd got his ass kicked, and then the Germans were able to infiltrate into America, bring a bunch of their scientists and researchers and officials into America through Operation Paperclip. And, you know, long story, huge relearning of history that the mass public needs to know. And I'll be doing future videos on Antarctica and all that too, because I've gotten a few really good questions on that. But anyway, that's how Germany was able to obtain the technology. And then, of course, with that infiltration into America, brought it into America, and then that's how our current military-industrial complex blew up. So moving on from Germany into the Earth scientists. So let's talk about some of these guys that were able to get their minds out of the mainstream science realm and delve into some of these esoteric sciences. And one of those is Victor Schauberger. Victor Schauberger was a scientist in Austria in the 1920s or so, early 1900s. And this is actually another way that the Germans were able to obtain their science, was through Victor Schauberger. But he basically studied water. And that might not sound like it's connected to this, but when you actually vortex water, it does have some anti-gravity capabilities. Again, this might sound nuts. Go check it out. Victor Schauberger created what was called a repulsine, and this was a device that spun and actually had some anti-gravity capabilities with it. But there was Victor Schauberger, there was Nikola Tesla. Of course, I don't need to get into his backstory because a lot of you are aware of Nikola Tesla, but when he died in 1943 in New York, the FBI swooped in, took a bunch of his papers, and many of those papers to this day we still haven't seen. So his work ended up in the hands of the military-industrial complex and T. Townsend Brown. Of course, if you saw my video on anti-gravity that I released a week or two ago, I discussed T. Townsend Brown. And just a quick refresher, or if you didn't see that video, T. Townsend Brown was a scientist in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s who researched and found out that if you take a metallic disc and insert a high voltage electric charge into it, it then has anti-gravity capabilities. And he was literally making huge discs fly around at hundreds of miles an hour just with electricity. So of course his technology ended up in the hands of the military-industrial complex, and rest is history. So there are just a few instances, a few researchers that there's plenty of information out there about. I mean, T. Townsend Brown literally has a patent out there that you can go research. Tesla, ungodly amounts of information out there about him. And then Schauberger has some books you can check out. And then, of course, there's plenty of researchers and scientists that we don't know the names of that are involved in these black projects that, of course, are researching all of this. So there's a few ways that earth scientists have helped these SSPs. And then, of course, there's a reverse engineering of ET craft. Namely, the most popular one is Roswell, when 2 or possibly 3 extraterrestrial craft discs were actually shot out of the air, I believe, by our military-industrial complex, and they were taken down. And then the craft were not actually taken to Area 51. They were taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So these crafts were taken to Wright-Patterson, and the reverse engineering began on them. And then another one that's not as well known that Roswell is the Battle of LA. And of course there was a movie named after this incident, which was done for, of course, plausible deniability. Oh, it's crazy idea that I got there. Did you get that out of the movie of the same name? No, actually, the Battle of LA refers to an event that happened in February of 1942 in Long Beach, California, where this extraterrestrial craft, mothership essentially, parked itself over Long Beach, and a bunch of small scout ships then emanated from this craft. Nothing happened. There was no attack, essentially. But what happened, of course, it was during wartime, so all the jitters of the people stationed at the military bases there, they just unloaded all of this anti-aircraft artillery at this mothership in the air and the scout ships. And side note here, William Tompkins, who I mentioned earlier, he actually witnessed this. He was living in Long Beach at the time, so again, his testimony is fascinating. So he literally witnessed Battle of LA. But anyway, 2 of the scout ships that came out of that mothership were downed by the anti-aircraft artillery fire. And one ended up in the ocean, one ended up on land. The Navy confiscated the one in the ocean, the Army got the one on land. We know that because of leaked documents and leaked memos. And that's essentially what occurred at the Battle of LA. So there's been multiple craft recovered, multiple things that the military-industrial complex can reverse engineer. Of course, it's difficult. It took them quite a while. But then with the German researchers and scientists then infiltrating into America in the late 40s and mainly in the 50s, that then assisted in the reverse engineering, and then boom, they got, they were able to understand this advanced science technology. So, moving on, if the deep state has all this super advanced science and tech, well, they're going to want to build it out. They need money to do that. So let's discuss that. How did they get the funds to build out these secret space programs and the deep underground stuff and whatnot? First, let's discuss the missing Pentagon money. So, as many of you may know, the day before 9/11, September 10th, 2001, good old Donald Rumsfeld, Donny Boy, Secretary of Defense at the time, was on the floor of Congress testifying, admitting that they were missing, quote, missing $2.3 trillion from the Pentagon. So, mind you, very important to mention here, the Pentagon has never ever been audited. Granted, there's an audit now going on this year for the first time ever, not completed yet. Very interested to see how the results of that will turn out. But before this year, it's never ever been audited. So Donald Rumsfeld admitted to $2.3 trillion missing from it. Fast forward 14 years after 2001 to 2015, that number, based on a Department of Defense Inspector General report, shot up to $6.5 trillion. Now, fast forward to this point in time, and getting some other researchers delving into this topic, that number has been estimated to be up to 15 to 20, even maybe $21 trillion just missing from the Pentagon. Okay? That's a lot of money. That's a crap ton of money. And again, that's just from the Pentagon. Let's move on into another way that the deep state loves to make their money, and that is through black market trade, trafficking. trafficking of guns, trafficking of drugs, trafficking of humans, trafficking of organs. And we don't exactly know how much money the deep state has made through these means, but could it have been billions? I would not even doubt it. Could it have been trillions? Again, I would not even doubt it. When it comes to organ trafficking, I believe I read somewhere that, for instance, like a kidney can net $200,000 to $250,000 on the black market. It's crazy, right? And of course, all the other organs. You know, you can get into the human trafficking and the child sex trafficking. You know, all the nasty shit that the deep state's into. How much money is made there. But of course, a lot of this money does not go into space programs and secret projects. It might go into, well, goes into secret stuff, but not necessarily this. But I, again, wouldn't doubt that a lot of money made on the black market stuff goes into this as well. And then the last thing that I want to discuss in the money section here is this just kind of rhetorical question. Would they even need the money, right? If they have technology that advanced, granted, I didn't really get into what kind of technology they have, but that would have been helpful to include here. But we're talking anti-gravity, free energy, life extension technologies, portal technologies, just all kinds of amazing stuff. Would they even need money with that kind of technology? And this delves into the idea of breakaway civilizations. So, you know, you have a few big black triangles or, you know, cigar-shaped craft that can take you and a whole bunch of supplies over to Mars really quick. Well, you can establish essentially a colony there, and you wouldn't even need to keep siphoning money from the public. So all this stuff, you know, it's kind of just for shits and giggles anymore. It's kind of just because they want us to be poor and broke and dumb and not having enough time to actually research this stuff and wasting our lives away at a wage slave 9-to-5 job, right? So that's just, you know, they wouldn't even need money at this point. But anyway, so that's how a lot of this stuff, a lot of the money went into the deep state to build out this kind of technology. And now for the last part here, I want to talk about how it's been kept secret. So first, let's talk about compartmentalization. Compartmentalization. This is one of the main ways it's been kept secret. And the idea of compartmentalization is that if you're in one of these programs, if you're in a project that's working on whatever the case is, you know, whatever you're working on, reverse engineering a craft or trying to create a craft or, you know, dissecting ET bodies, whatever the case is, you're in this project, even if you're, you know, you could be in a company. Hold on, let me work around my explanation of this. So multiple people could be in a company and they have no idea what people literally down the hall could be doing. This is the idea of compartmentalization, of course, because they have NDAs, they have all this, they're not supposed to talk about plenty of the stuff that they're doing. But so compartmentalization is a very efficient way to hide this stuff. And the example of the Manhattan Project, where they were working on the nuclear bomb, they had 100,000 people working on this project. None of them even knew what they were working on until the bombs dropped. So, and that's a good point as well. In compartmentalization, you have different people working on tiny little things. You could be, I mean, they could be working on like a bolt, create a bolt, or create like this tiny little thing that all goes into this big project. And only the people at the top of the food chain, the executives or whoever's heading the project, know what everybody's working on, but every single person is working on this tiny little portion of it, and they don't know what the bigger picture is. That's what I wanted to say about compartmentalization. And then they have the concept of acknowledged and unacknowledged programs. It's just very interesting, very crucial to discuss here. So an acknowledged program or Special Access Project, SAP. An acknowledged SAP, so it's still secret, it's still classified, but it is, if you're in a acknowledged SAP, you have to report it to superiors, right? If you're in an unacknowledged SAP or a USAP, you don't report it to anybody outside of the program or anybody that's not on a need-to-know basis. And this could be, I mean, you could have you could be at a lower level, say you're like a colonel, lieutenant colonel, something like that, and you're in a USAP. Even if a general or an admiral or the president of the United States is asking you about that USAP, they're not in it, so they're not in the need to know. And that's what I was mentioning earlier about the outside government knowledge. So this is another reason, this is another way how it's been kept so secret. And if you want, if you don't believe me on this one, there's a 1995 DoD manual that actually describes how there's acknowledged SAPs and unacknowledged SAPs, and then the unacknowledged secret access programs can actually be hidden within other classified programs and like umbrellaed down. So it's just, it's like down 100 levels, literally and figuratively. And that's one way it's been kept secret, is through the compartmentalization and then the unacknowledged nature of the compartments. Then of course we have disinformation and PSYOPs. NASA has always been used as that front organization to the public, saying, oh, this is the most advanced stuff we have for space. Oh, we still have to use these super old fossil fuels and rockets to get up into space, you know? And that's how they've actually kept anti-gravity technology secret. Of course, the extraterrestrial idea of this all, one way they've been kept secret, and just through all of the mainstream media, science, education, bullshit. Disinformation everywhere. PSYOPs, right? So then we get into the Air Force. The Air Force has been used as a massive front. They had what's called Project Blue Book that you can look into. It was a project in the 60s where the Air Force basically put the kibosh on the extraterrestrial subject. They said, oh, all the UFO sightings ever done were swamp gas or weather balloons or yada yada, right? So there's been multiple fronts that have kept this idea quiet. And then, of course, in regards to the secret space program and the SSP, anytime there's a UFO sighting, very interesting how it's always brushed off. If it's not brushed off as a weather balloon or swamp gas, they leave it unacknowledged. They go, oh, it was an anomalous thing in the sky, right? So the reason I say this is because I've been researching conspiracies for a few years now, quite a few years. Like 6, 7 now. And I know that's not as many as some other people, but in proportion to my age, quite a bit of my life. And I didn't even fathom the idea of a secret space program till just a couple years ago. But I've been researching UFOs and the extraterrestrial issue and everything like that. But the idea of not just the SSP, but how deep it goes, didn't even occur to me. So, you know, there's so many different psychological operations and disinfo fronts. Even a lot of people in the UFO community, I believe, are disinformation. Sorry about that cut, guys. My battery died. So anyway, where was I? So even in the UFO community, there could be quite a few assets spreading disinformation in that. So that's another way, right? NASA's a front, Air Force using their PSYOPs located within different truthing communities. The act like truthers might spread some truth, but there's some disinformation in there as well. And then, of course, fear and ridicule. If you think of all of the movies made about extraterrestrials over the past 5 decades, 98% of them are all negative. They portray ETs as being things that are here to, you know, conquer humanity. Granted, there are some negatively oriented races, but there's a lot of races here to help us as well. So there's fear, ridicule, little green men, tinfoil hats, yada yada yada. Need I say more? So this keeps plenty of people from researching it. This keeps plenty of people from researching these topics. And of course, like I always say, disinformation. A lot of that going on all in the media. So there is one way. We talked about compartmentalization, disinformation, and PSYOPs. And then, of course, just plain threat. Literal threat. Threat of whether it's your career, your pension, whether it's threat of harm on you and your family, or literal threat of death to anybody working within these programs. If they talk, they're done. They just disappear. And not only that, but there is no paper trail. That's a big one that I didn't discussed in all of these, but there's no paper trail. So once people are brought into these projects, they don't have all of the memos and documents and all that. Basically, what do I want to say? So without all of that paperwork, it leaves much less of a chance of that escaping and then things becoming public. So of course, one way we found out about a lot of this stuff is through leaked documents. A lot of leaked documents from the 40s and 50s, and maybe even the 60s, right? So by them taking anything physical out of the picture, that then cut down on the chance of a lot of this becoming public. So again, how it's kept secret, compartmentalization, disinformation, psychological warfare, psychological operations right here, and literal threat. So that's it, guys. That's the video that I wanted to do for you. An overview of the secret space program, how they got the technology, how they got the money, how it's been kept secret. I hope you enjoyed this video here. And again, if you want to learn much more about it, specifically from myself, again, I'll be doing a couple webinars later this month, one on the secret space program, one on ET disclosure in general. You can check the description for links to those. And again, if you want more education, be more links below this video where you can go check it all out. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see y'all again soon.